'Twas the night before Cinco de Mayo, when all through la casa not a creature was stirring, not even a cucaracha. The piñatas were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. George Lopez would soon be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of tacos danced in their heads. Wait, I feel like that's not right. But what do we care? What, all of a sudden we want holiday celebrations to make sense? How many of you, without consulting Google, can genuinely say you know why we celebrate Cinco de Mayo? I'll give you a hint. If you're thinking Mexican Independence Day, like the other 60% of Americans, you're wrong. But since we're all super educated, well-cultured, functional members of our blended society, you definitely knew that in reality, Cinco de Mayo is a holiday celebrating the pride that Mexicans felt for Mexico after victorying the Battle of Puebla in 1862, as the clear underdogs against the Second French Empire. But don't worry, I didn't actually expect you to know that. I mean, you were just so tired the day your class learns about it. Or, more likely, this simply hasn't been taught to you at all. And that is the problem. An article written by the Tampa Bay Times in 2023 explains that due to bans and policies being put into place in our own country, our own history is being withheld from us students. So today, let's learn about a primal but overlooked aspect of our civil rights history, the Chicano movement. Let's first be the first creatures to stir up and understand the logistics of the movement. Then, let's break open the piñata and explore the legacy that it left behind, before finally snuggling up and envisioning a more enlightened and educated future. In order to unpack the Chicano movement, we must first understand the history that it was born from. In the 1930s, the US government was figuring out solutions to the problems of the Great Depression. And as the Stanford Department of History explains, one of their most brilliant ideas was the forceful deportation of approximately 2 million people of Mexican descent or origin, of which 60% were full American citizens. This anti-Mexican attitude was only the tip of the iceberg, as what followed in the years since then were increasingly hostile attitudes. In 1943, with the war in Europe in full swing, Americans were asked to conserve as more raw materials were being diverted to weapons manufacturing. So, when Mexican-American men wearing their stylish zoot suits were observed living their life, it was deemed unpatriotic. And so, many servicemen attacked these young men for daring to wear what was seen as waste of fabric, but to them was a way of expressing their cultural pride. It was clear to anyone with an empathetic heart that the attitude at the time was that if you dared to be proud of your Mexican heritage, you were marked as unpatriotic and a danger to the public. By the 1960s, the people were tired of this unjust treatment. When the term Chicano was born, it was actually used as a slur for the lower class Mexican Americans. But eventually, they wore that with pride, and it led to Chicano becoming their identity. With other civil rights movements booming at the time, Chicanos started to fight for their own equal rights, with leaders such as Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Sal Castro. They were able to organize protests, boycotts, and walkouts stretching across multiple states, with some of the major events being the Delano Grape Boycott and the LA Blowouts, which led to 10,000 students participating in walkouts from their schools. These efforts were all in an attempt to gain recognition from the entire country and the government that hasn't been on their side since they became citizens. They were not going to stop fighting for the destruction of discrimination, educational segregation, and for their voting rights. Eventually, through these people's hard work, determination, and hope, they were able to cause many reforms to take place. Now that we understand the historic side of it, let's explore the legacy that it left in the US, starting with the bilingual and bicultural programs in the Southwest. According to the International Social Review, the Bilingual Education Act of 1968 was one of the most significant advancements in education. The BEA, now a part of the federal education policy, ensured that students who are learning English had specific educational rights, including the right to be taught in their home language. Today, with about 5.2 million students in the US being bilingual or only speaking their home language, this act was extremely helpful for their education. Considering all of that, we would most likely not be where we currently are today without it. Or I might not have been. You see, I'm the child of two immigrants who came into this country chasing the American dream for themselves and their future families. But they had not become citizens yet when I was born, so I possibly could have been at a school with no computers, clubs, or any diversity. Thankfully, the past generations did put in the work for the future that we're currently living in right now. Now, as I mentioned before, the Bilingual Education Act of 1968 allowed for a lot of reform to be made in education. But recently, that all has been challenged. According to an article from the University of Washington, there are bans and policies being put into place by the Texas legislature, such as the House Bill 900, which was their most recent attempt at banning books. This has threatened to strip away the little bit of representation that Latinos receive in literature. One example being The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, a house of a girl growing up in the Hispanic quarter of Chicago. The reason for its banning being that such reading material encourages skepticism against American values. I wonder why. Not only that, but another example of people trying to move us back in time is people trying to promote ideas of how to restrict the education given to the people who have made our history and the descendants of the people who made that history. All over Texas, there are billboards from the Huffines Liberty Foundation. These billboards saying to stop educating illegal aliens. And if you go to their website, their homepage displays their main goal of ending birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. But all of that is not to say that there are no others protecting the reforms made by the Chicano movement. Founded in 2014, Latinos in Heritage Conservation is the leading nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving Latino stories, places, and cultural heritage in the United States. They hold conferences all around the country and recruit volunteers to help them in their mission of protecting our history. Similarly, the Hispanic Institute focuses on consolidating an educative forum to teach Latino students how to become more important leaders in America's future. So today, we were the first to stir up and explore the logistics of the Chicano movement. We then cracked open the piñata and explored the legacy that it left behind, before finally snuggling up and realizing the amount of threats and help we have to preserve our history. The American Psychiatric Society explains that the only thing worse than misinformation is disinformation. Actively trying to ignore the history of the country that we live in will only lead to us making the same mistakes we have before. Thank you.